Hello, everyone. Hopefully we have some people show up today for the Ask Me Anything. If not, we have some things we can talk about for those who will view this offline. I'm just checking for updates here on the Azure Data Studio at this point just to see what we have here. I don't think I'm going to install the Windows update, so yeah, not likely. So we'll just do Azure Data Studio here. So how is your, oh, hey Brent, how are you? Thanks for the shout out the other day on your YouTube or on your Ask Me Anything about SQL Server. Appreciate you. Good old Brent Ozar's coming by to say hi. Have fun, Brent. You're awesome. Go play in your pool. Well, that was a good start to have Brent come by and say hi. Hopefully, we'll have people trickle in. Today, I was going to basically talk about for nobody showing up or for less people showing up today and not having any questions in PolGab at this point. Hopefully, we'll get that going somehow a little better. But basically, I was playing over the weekend with a tool that is from DBA Tools. And obviously this is a DBA Tools session, so I was wanting to show some fun things here. I'm going to actually start a new notebook just to see if we can do something fun here. We'll take it out of the kernel of SQL and put it into PowerShell. This is what happens when you have a brand new install of Azure Data Studio without Python installed. Typically, I do not use an existing installation because I've seen it cause problems. One day I'll debug it enough to give it to the product group and have them change their tune. So we'll let the notepad thing go here for the notebooks. But basically, let me go out to the web and show you what I was looking at. A request came by to find a way to take the Glenn Berry scripts, and those of you who don't know where they are, I'm going to go there right now. It's in a thing called Glenn SQL Performance. And if you don't know that thing, then you just type Glenn Berry SQL, and you'll find Glenn Berry here in the top of the list. So Glenn Berry SQL Performance, in the Resources tab, you will see all the diagnostic queries. So you'll have a diagnostic queries here for information queries, information queries. So this is managed instance. This is SQL database. And then you'll have the versions that are supported or still in support. And then you'll have the legacy ones, which he calls legacy 2016 SP2 and diagnostic queries for 16, 14, 12, 8, 8R2, and then 8, and then 05. So it goes all the way back. Hopefully you guys are not dealing with a lot of legacy stuff. But the request was asked if I could take the managed instance diagnostic information queries and if I could split them out into their own beast. Now, we know that DBA Tools, we're going to go here and just go search for the DBA Tools GitHub. And they've changed places a while ago, long time, for data plat DBA Tools. But as you can see, you can tell that there's some code here, and basically there are two pieces to this splitting. Let's see if it's finished. Why do I have two? That's interesting. I don't necessarily want two of them, but I'll leave one up. But it's still running the dependencies for notebooks. But basically, there are two pieces to the Glenn Berry stuff, and I'll show you what they are. Because the interesting piece is that there is we're just going to import module DBA Tools here, and I was playing around with it. There's a lot more to the version in DBA Tools, but I split it out. It's open source code. So I grab the functions that I'm going to use, and there's 2 of them. But basically, if I want to get command module DBA tools, and then the name is going to be, I think, diag, and I think there's export DBA diagnostic query. I did not use that one. Invoke DBA diagnostic query. I did not use that one. I did a new DBA diagnostic ADS notebook and a save. No, I actually didn't even use save. The one I'm using here is public, but there is a private one that does not show up, and that's in private on the DataPlat DBA tools window, and in functions. So they're private functions, and you go down here, and there is a, I think it's called new. Oh, no, it's not. There it is. Invoke DBA. So if you look at this guy, it's invoke DBA diagnostic query script parser. Now I want to show you this just for a second because I took this script and I stripped out a lot of stuff because I didn't need it for what I was doing. A lot of this is gauged on, and I'll show you the other code for the other window. Let's just grab this guy here. And we'll go into the public function. So we'll go into DBA tools here, public functions, and you're going to see the new DBA diagnostic ADS workbook or notebook, and I'll show you what that does. The reason why I stripped it out, I didn't really need all of the stuff, but the cool part about this piece is that if you look at this new DBA Diagnostics ADS workbook, you look here and there are parameters here for validate set. Now, the one I was after is not in this list, so I will bug this in the issues and just get them to add it. But basically, there's 2005, 8, R2, 12, 14, 16, SP2, 17, 19, 22, and Azure SQL Database. Now, if you look at our list, they do have Azure SQL Database, but what about managed instance? It's really an instance, and he has specific diagnostic queries for that. So what I missed was the idea that, oh man, I can't use this because it wants me to validate the set, and it goes down here. If you look at this, it has some process parameters in place to keep you safe. And if you don't specify a target version, it goes out and looks at the version that you have for your parameter of SQL instance. And it goes and looks and sees what product level you are at or what version you're at, minor and major. And then it puts together and says, hey, which one are you? Well, inside managed instance, you will find that managed instance is not a version of 16, 15. It's 12, but that doesn't mean it's 2014. So it has its own versioning things, and it is different than SQL Database. SQL Database, you run queries against the database itself. So you don't actually run it against the engine of the SQL Server like we would normally do in our on-premises stuff. So the reality is it invokes the DBA query to get this data to make sure we can find out which one he goes to, because look at this. This is where he goes. So get child item path, and then module root bin diagnostic query, and then a filter on diagnostic queries with the target version. Now the problem with that is, like I said in mine, is that you don't get that luxury because you are going to get the version that is managed instance. So here's managed instance. If we were to go in here and we go back here and look at the DBA tools GitHub, we look at this bin folder. And in the bin folder, there are diagnostic queries. And notice they have these. Now see, this says SQL managed instance. And so he pulls it down. They pull it down, which is very nice, except I can't access it because there is no parameter that says 2017, 2022. And I don't see this version here, right? So when you look in the query of this piece, it wants you to specify the version. And the version, just server diagnostics, the target version, doesn't exist. So unfortunately, if I specify, and this is only if you don't do the target version. So if you specify the target version, that's fine. But here, this is where you die. Target version cannot contain SQL managed instance like this says. So they do have managed instance in the SQL directory or in the list of diagnostic queries, but this doesn't give us the ability to specify them in our query here. So I had to suck it out, pull it in, and make sure that everything is good to make sure that things worked like I wanted to. But I'm just going to use 2022 because it totally is there. And you have the ability to specify in the parameters a path to where it's going to put it. Okay, and it's going to stuff it out there like you want it to. Like I said, I modified these. I mean, it's really simple. I modified these things to let me be this way. And also I wanted to make sure that you understood that this is a break in tradition. Normally when you do like export SQL or export DBA login, it actually will create the file name for you. In this particular case, if you look at string path, it's a mandatory parameter so that you can put that ADS notebook out in the back. But look what happens at the bottom. It does a write all lines to the path. So you don't get the luxury of the path generating its own file. Okay, so invoke DBA diagnostics query script parser is that what I was talking about here. And it basically knows how to grab that file and strip out all of the things, put them into columns, and you'll see them when I export them. But here, it just means that I can't use managed instance yet. I will bug this and fix it and have them fix it or whatever. It's not really that hard. You just have to have that name in it, just like Azure SQL Database, because this is the option here. So mine would just be SQL managed instance. And then all it does is basically parses it out with the, if I don't want DB specific or if I want DB specific, it'll parse these out for each object and put them in cells. So there's a markdown cell, there's a code cell. And basically that lets you have a beautiful notebook when it gets done. And we're going to run it right now, show you how it works. Let's go back into here. Okay. Everything is Jupyter's running now, so that's great. So we're going to go into our new file. I'm going to tell it that it's PowerShell. And we're going to use the current terminal. I've already talked to Aaron Stellato about the terminal thingies. That's really weird. Terminal, the default terminal, and then the terminal that gets used for other things. But right now it'll run in this terminal. This is, if I do PS version table, this is 5.1, so that's good. So most people will run in. We're going to import module DBA tools. I'm not sure why it did that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say new DBA diagnostic ADS notebook. Okay, so that's the first thing. The parameter is SQL instance, and I don't know that I don't think that's required. New, yeah, just target version. I don't think you ever have to do an instance, and unless you're not specifying the target version, right? That's when it does the invoke a DBA query on that. So we're not going to do that. We're going to say dash target version, and I'll show you what's wrong. SQL managed instance. That's the name of our thing, and then we're going to say dash. We're going to say path. We're going to say that we're going to put it in this demos folder. So we'll open up this, go into this PC, C drive, demos, and we'll put it right in there. So let's see, C:\demos. And then we're going to say diag1.ipynb. That's the extension for the notebooks. I don't need any really thing else, except if I wanted to include database specific. I'm going to do that just for fun, but I don't need anything else. So watch what happens when we import module DBA tools. We'll go there, we'll do that. We'll go back in here, and I'm just going to tell him I want SQL Managed Instance, and watch what happens when it gets done importing. I'm going to run this, and it's going to come back and say, I'm sorry, I can't validate on the parameter of target version of SQL Managed Instance. Even though we know that if we were to look in the bin folder that there is a SQL Managed Instance file, there is a validator here that won't let us do that. So we're going to change it to be 2022 just because we can. So let's go back into our Azure Data Studio, and we're going to say the version is 2022. It's going to go out and it's going to output this diag1.ipynb. And so I can go into Azure Data Studio and I can say open, file. We're going to go into this PC and demos, and we're going to grab the notebook. And it's called diag1.ipynb. If I open that up, you'll see that I need to trust the little guy. I open that up and watch what happens. It's going to put a notebook in place that is pretty darn cool. It takes a little bit to render it because I think he has like 60 or 70 queries in this thing. And it does take a minute for the notebook kernel to execute it. Okay. So, and I don't need the, I did want to make sure I had the Python installed because if you require it to do a PowerShell notebook. But notice, here's the SQL and OS information, and here's your select add server name. We're going to go into Glenn Barry's stuff and show you just how that looks. So if I click on SQL 2022, you will see that there comes some query data stuff that will say, it doesn't include that. Let's go here. The query that starts, this is query. This is not query one. This is a stopgap. So in his queries, he says it's stopgap. Here's query one, and it says select add server name and version. Well, that's what ours says. SQL OS and version information, and here's our little guy right here. Okay, so if I clicked here, it would want me to connect. Okay, so it says, oh, where are you going to connect? I'm just going to connect to prod SQL 1, SQL 01. And Windows Authentication, and we'll just connect to master. Yep, we'll enable that and trust it. We'll go to master, and we'll say connect. Okay, enable trust server certificate. Yep. So notice if I execute that, you'll see that here's prod 1, and here's Microsoft SQL Server 2022, RTMCU2. So this will run, but what the advantage is if I go into here with the notebook, and I go and execute each one of these. Now, I'm not going to say execute all. I can say run all. Okay, so there's a run all button that I can do, but I'm not going to because if I do, then we end up with a problem because some of these queries actually take quite a long time to run. So we won't do run all in this case, but notice that I can take and run this, and it says detected in socket. It says get socket physical core information and logical core from the error log. So if I click on this guy here, you'll notice that I have 1 socket, 2 cores per socket, and 4 logical processors per socket. So this is way cool. This notebook contains a lot of information, and I was able to send it to somebody. They clicked run on each one of these things at a time, and now I have all the data back into a notebook that I can open in my Azure Data Studio. Now, I will warn you that this individual, when I gave it to them, they had to split it into 2. And the reason is because there's so many cells. I mean, I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and you'll see there's so many cells down here. I mean, that's a lot of cells that it has to execute. And some of it had a lot of data in it. And the bigger the data, the more prone you are to run out of memory or crash Azure Data Studio. I will be working with the product team to see if they have any ideas of how to make it not do that. But at this point, I can save it. And if I exit out of this notebook and I say File, Open File, I choose the notebook again, you'll see it takes a minute to render. I will show you what it looks like on the back of the covers too, because that's an interesting view. So let's do that while we're waiting. This notebook is 153K in text. Okay, so that's a pretty big guy. So let's do this. Notepad. Okay, and we'll scroll. Notice it's in JSON. That's important to know. But notice it has metadata up here that says it's a kernel of SQL for your notebook, language of SQL, and your language info is SQL. After that, you have lots of cells. And that's basically what we populated, is a big array. This is a square bracket. That's an array. And in all of this menagerie of stuff, we're looking at saying that there's my version info. See, this is markdown, pound, version info to be big. So if we look at the notebook itself, yeah, see, Windows not responding, keep waiting. And so this version info is big. Then we look at Notepad and it says SQL and OS version, but there's no markdown. See, there's no pound or nothing. And so it's smaller. So, I did not mean to unclick that thing. It's smaller. So see, here's your smaller text, but it's still in your cell, markdown cell. Okay. But now we have metadata here that says, here's my cell GUID, which is fine. That's just part of it. And here's my cell type of code. Okay, so I've finished my JSON here for my cell, and then I have another cell, and it has a type of code. Here's my select. Okay, so all of a sudden I have the ability to programmatically, which is what this function does, is programmatically creates a text file that has cells and the version for the metadata of kernel spec. And you can see that here in the function. If we go back here, go to here, this is our new -ADS notebook, and we go down to the bottom, you'll see that we actually pre-prep it. See, there's our output object with the metadata, kernel spec, name SQL, language info SQL, version close, and my format minor, and my format for, and my cells that I just built from parsing that. That's what I got back from here, is parsing cells plus equals. Okay, so pretty kind of cool that you can actually put cells in here. It translates them into an array, and see, we convert to JSON. So we have a big long string with lots of curly braces, lots of things in there, and all of a sudden we hit convert to JSON, and guess what? We get a JSON object out, which is write all lines, is going to write all of it out to that path file, and then we get child autumn path, and that's what we saw in our window here. Just so we could see that it's there. The size of it is 106,000 bytes, and then diag1.ipynb. So that's what I played with this weekend. It was super fun. I did dissect it a little bit and I kind of took it myself because I didn't want, I needed it for the managed instance. Now, I could have renamed my file and put it in the bin folder, but I didn't. I stripped out this thing where it found all these things and just bagged it. I just stripped out some things in my function, made it a function, and ran it because this is open source and it's licensed under MIT, I believe, and it doesn't restrict you from, let's see, MIT license, so I can use it anywhere I want, however I want. If I want to know what MIT license grants me the ability to do, but basically says permission is hereby granted free of charge to any person obtaining a copy of this software to deal in the software without restriction, including without limitation the rights to use, copy, modify, merge, publish, distribute. I was pretty covered in using this function, and all I need to do is make sure that this copyright notice is included in all the copies or substantial portions of the software that I use somewhere else. But ultimately, this DBA Tools module is open source and it is MIT licensed, so I can take pieces of it that I need and use it in my stuff. Now, that's easier said than done, but in this particular case, it had no tie to anything except invoke-DBA query. And I didn't need the invoke-DBA query, so I just needed the pieces otherwise to just take any of Glenn Berry's files. And I modified mine to do this. Just so you are aware that you can do it, I modified it to do this kind of thing. My script parser basically said, accept a path. And it validates, so I pass in a file name. And it validates that it exists, test path, to make sure it exists before it goes on. If it doesn't exist, it'll throw an error saying, hey, you can't do this. I took out the stop functions, but I basically said, here's it grabbed my full script. I passed in the full path name so that it could grab it, and then it parses it out. When it gets done parsing it out, it sends out the parsed script. So pretty nice. So I didn't need a lot of this other stuff. Most of it I kept, except for the stuff that I didn't need. I didn't need exclude plan column. I didn't have to worry about column parsing. All I wanted to do was pass in that file name and get back what I wanted. That's it. So super cool function. The one I didn't use very much of at all was the new DBA diagnostic ADS notebook. So if I do new, I thought I had that up. Oh, I dovetailed because I wanted to see the versions of files. So new DBA diagnostic ADS notebook. I just saw it. I know I just saw it. Diagnostic. In here, really, all I used the path. I didn't use the instance. I didn't use the credential. I didn't even use this. I just said path. And I had an output path. I had an output path, and I had the input path. And then I left this. But enable exception is very much a DBA tools thing. I look in here and say stop function. I didn't put those in because I was only passing in a file. That's it. So no need for this. No need for this. And I needed this. And that's pretty much it. So all of a sudden I invoked my DBA query script parser guy because he's private in DBA tools. It's public in mine because I only had 2 scripts and it was .ps1. So I just .sourced them in, I executed them, and I got my cells back. And then I got my cells inside my JSON, and then write file out. That's it. So pretty cool 2 functions. That's what I was going to talk about. Is a little project I did over the weekend. It was pretty fun, but it worked out great. I didn't have to worry about parsing it out. It parsed it out for me, and it had all the format. That's why sometimes we leverage the code other people write, because I did have part of this. If you look at the things that we were doing for parsing, query number, there's a query number in every query. But notice if it starts with dash and not equal to blank, if they trim the line, so if it was only a dash, if the line wasn't null, if the line didn't equal a new line, then parse out the line. Okay, so it's like, wow, that's cool. But basically that's pretty much what I did, and that's all it does. It basically looks for these things for your match, does match 1, match 2, match 3, and like I said, when you look at the queries themselves, you can see that they have a format. Dash. They have a thing here that goes in the small, and look at the version info. That ends up being big, and there's the query number. So all I have to look for is parenthesis query. He made sure that was nowhere in any of the things, and all of a sudden I have my query number. I have my title, and I have my text, and some of these are bigger. The one thing I'd like to do here is this stuff. I'd like to put this stuff somewhere, but because the format is basically the title and the query number, and then the query, and then data about the query. So what you should know. So in this one, it's not too easy. In this one, it does. So if you get instance level configuration values, query 4, configuration values, and then it says focus on these settings: automatic soft NUMA, backup checksum. This is important information if you're using them yourself. If you're putting them in a notebook, the notebook is going to have a lot of stuff, and you may not be focused on this. You might. So you might actually put a markdown section, code section, and a markdown section. Just know that the code section, like we saw here, does this. See how it does execution time, blah, blah, blah. If I were to put a markdown, it would come all the way down here. Not that that's bad, because the results are here. So I would add a markdown section down here with the code that he has below the query. See, dash, 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 dash. And I believe that that's consistent. If I remember right, no, it is not. So it is not consistent. Oh, it is right there. So if I grab this and I went to the next one where it said dash, dash, and there was new lines in here and a query line, I knew that I started the next query. I could grab all the way to here to 212, go up to 192, and put this in a markdown cell below it. So that may be one of the enhancements I ask for. It does add more text, but it's very kind of cool to have this and then have below the cell to say, here's how I'd use this data. Because see how big the cell is for code? It encompasses the out and the input. So, but that's the one thing I would love to see is an extra code, an extra markdown cell to be put in that place. So we are at time, and we have been talking about 2 functions, and it's been a blast. These are super great pieces that you can use. And like I said, I use DBA tools every day. I swear I use it every day for something, whether it gets get-DBA disk space or whatever it is. I use it all the time to get data from SQL and to get things done in SQL. They now have a lot of modification statements that you can do. And that's really cool where we get the value of the DBA tools module. But I wanted to show you that to you today, and hopefully we'll get some more questions that come in. And we're glad that we had one. Brent Ozar came in and said hi to us, and we appreciate you, Brent. Have fun in your pool. And those of you who don't know, Brent doesn't ask me anything as well about SQL Server. He's on, check his schedule out on Twitch. He's on Twitch as Brent Ozar. So if you want to go and check him out, you can do that too. He gave me a shout out on his cruise, and I appreciate that. So here's a shout out back to you, Brent. Twitch.tv/Brent Ozar. You'll be able to watch him do the Ask Me Anything About SQL Server. He loves to make SQL Server go faster, and he is a great, smart guy. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Hopefully this was helpful in your plight of learning DBA tools and what it can do for you. And we will see you on the next one. Tomorrow there is an AMA for the SQL PowerShells, not just related only to DBA tools, but to SQL PowerShell. And actually that one will be delayed. So just so you know, that will be delayed another day. So we'll talk to you later.